Welcome to OM Report by Andre Alpa, your interview-focused podcast on topics from online marketing to internet startups.
All right. How's everybody doing this morning? Yeah? All right, cool. I've got some slides, but I think Brett said we could talk until like 10 a.m., so we'll have time for Q&A too, so not too worried about it. If we can bring up the presentation on the deck. So, thank you everybody for coming. I know like day one is not as hard to get up at 9 a.m. Day two is a little harder to get up at 9 a.m. when you're in Las Vegas. So I appreciate everybody coming here. I was making my slides and I realized the same thing. I realized the very first PubCon that I went to was London and Boston in 2003. And it was a little bit smaller then, great set of folks. But you know, I found a few pictures. Brett didn't always wear a suit, and Pub didn't always stand for publishers, by the way. And yeah, it's a little weird. That's what I looked like 10 years ago. That was before all the spammers gave me gray hair. So, all right, but you guys want to hear about what's going on with Google, what's the future, you know, what direction is Google moving in? And one of the best ways to do that is to look at where we've gone. So I want to talk about the state of the index for a few minutes and talk a little bit about the moves that Google's done so that you can predict where is Google going to go in the future. So we've actually doubled down on a lot of what I call moonshot changes. So these are changes that, you know, Larry Page says, think big, like think of the impossible. So the knowledge graph. That's not just taking Wikipedia and making it into something pretty. It's actually trying to understand the entities, the people, the stuff that's really in the world. So my office mate, Amit Singhal, calls this things, not strings. So instead of just matching keywords, you really know what's behind a query. So York, New York Times, Times Square, knowing what the difference is between all those and not just matching up the individual keywords. We've also gotten a lot better at voice search. I thought about trying to do a demo of that today, and I was like, okay, live mic, reverb, inside a Faraday cage, inside basically a bunker. Probably the odds are not good that that'll work well, but if you haven't tried it, voice search is getting better and better. Conversational search sounds like voice search, but it's actually the ability to do queries over a session. So think pronouns. I'll show you an example of that in just a second. Google Now, sometimes you don't even think to do a query. Sometimes it would be really nice if Google would tell you, hey, you've got a meeting at 10 a.m., it's over at the Bellagio, the traffic's pretty bad, you'd better leave now if you want to make it to your meeting. So it's looking for that space where people aren't even thinking to necessarily do those queries yet. And one of the biggest changes we've been starting to do is something called deep learning. It's basically like these neural networks that people did in the 1980s, except it's multiple layers of neural networks, and it's using thousands of computers to try to improve what you can learn. And the stuff that it can learn is pretty crazy amazing. So let me show you just one example. If you take a word and you boil it down into 1,000-dimensional space, so you make it a vector where it's a series of 1,000 numbers, and you make every word into this 1,000-dimensional vector space, the relationships between those words actually tell you something about the semantic meaning of those words. So for example, given China and Beijing, you can say, okay, this word China is here in the space, this word here, Beijing, is here in the space, and the difference between those actually encodes something meaningful. It kind of encodes what is the capital of. And so if you take another country like Russia or Turkey, and you apply that same delta, that same vector, you get Moscow or you get Ankara. It doesn't just work for like capitals of countries, it works for all kinds of things. This is a paper that Jeff Dean, who's one of our senior fellows, in fact, he used to be a Google Fellow, which was level 10 on the career ladder, and then they made him a senior fellow, so his level actually goes up to 11. Like, these guys have worked on deep learning where they try to figure out what are the relationships between words. So the first row of this is just like France is to Paris as Italy is to Rome, or Japan is to Tokyo. But it starts to get smarter. You take a word like big and you compare where it goes to bigger, and then you apply that same vector to a word like small, and you get a word like larger. And so we're actually trying to teach Google to learn and to read at, you know, some sort of elementary school level or grade school. Google's 15 years old. It ought to be able to do some of these standardized tests. And it gets to some pretty crazy stuff. So like, you can see this row that has copper. The atomic symbol for copper is Cu. and then it can interpolate or extrapolate, okay, gold is AU and zinc is ZN. And it can kind of learn some crazy things, like Einstein is to scientist as Mozart is to a violinist. So over time, we're getting better and better at doing that sort of deep learning. We're also working on this voice search, so you can say, who is the Prime Minister of Turkey? Thanks to the knowledge graph, we actually know Turkey is a proper noun. It's actually an entity in the world. It should be capitalized. And so you can say, Recep Tayyip Erdogan is the Prime Minister of Turkey. But then you can keep going. You can say, how old is he? And we know that you were talking about the Prime Minister of Turkey from the previous query, and we'll say, okay, he's 59 years old. So Google is trying to figure out answers. We're trying to organize the world's information, make it universally accessible and useful, and actually figure out what is the person exactly asking for. Here's a query I was doing last night. I asked, will it rain tomorrow? And you can tap on the voice search, you can say that, and Google will actually reply back to you. Don't try it right now, but when you get home, just go to Chrome and you'll notice if you go to google.com, there's actually a microphone there. And you can click and you can talk directly to your computer and it will talk back. So it knows, will it rain tomorrow? It knows my location is in Las Vegas or Paradise, Nevada, and it gives me an answer. But then you can tie that together with conversational search and you can do a query like, what about Mountain View? All you have to do is say, what about Mountain View for the next query, and it knows you're still looking for the weather. And it says, oh no, it's not going to rain in Mountain View either tomorrow. And then you can keep going and you can say, how about this weekend? And I encourage you to try these queries out. And it will say, oh, you're talking about how about, well, it will rain in Mountain View this weekend. And it says, no, on Saturday in Mountain View, it's not going to rain. So we're starting to figure out the structure of what people are actually saying. We're starting to get a little bit better about that and understanding what people are asking for. So those are the sort of moonshot changes that we've got going on. I want to start big, and then we'll drill down to quality, then we'll drill down to web spam, then we'll talk about the future going the same way. So one of the big changes that we rolled out in the last few months is a change called Hummingbird. The idea behind Hummingbird is if you're doing a query, it might be a natural language query, and you might include some word that you don't necessarily need, like, what's the capital of Texas, my dear? Well, my dear doesn't really add anything to that query. It would be totally fine if you said just, what is the capital of Texas? Or, what is the capital of ever-lovin' Texas? Or, what is the capital of crazy, rebel, beautiful Texas? Some of those words don't matter as much. And previously, Google used to match just the words in the query. Now we're starting to say which ones are actually more helpful and which ones are more important. And so Hummingbird is a step in that direction where if you are saying or typing a longer query, then we're going to figure out which words matter more and give that more intelligent scoring. Now, there's a lot of articles written about Hummingbird. Like even when just the code name was known, people were like, okay, how will Hummingbird affect SEO? And even though people don't know exactly what Hummingbird is, they're still going to write 500 words about how Hummingbird affects SEO. And the fact is, it doesn't affect it that much. It affected 90% of queries, but only to a small degree. And we rolled it out for over a month without people even noticing. So it's a subtle change. It's not something that you need to worry about. It's not going to rock your world like Panda or Penguin. It's just going to make the results a little bit better, and especially on those long-tail queries or really specific queries, make them much better. So unless you're a spammer and you're targeting how many SEOs does it take to change a light bulb, and you've got like all the keywords, and you've got 15 variants of it, you've got a page for each one. If you're doing those really long tail things, then it might affect you, but in general, people don't need to worry that much about Hummingbird. Another change that we did is we were looking at softening Panda. So there's always people who we think should be affected by Panda, and there's sites that we think are really high quality and shouldn't be affected by Panda, and then you have a gray zone. And with that gray zone, you basically have to guess whether a site is high quality or not. And so we found some new signals that basically help us disambiguate that a little bit and move some of the sites that were in the gray zone toward the higher quality area. So softening the effect of Panda in some instances. We've also been looking at detecting the boosting authority. So take medical, for example. If you're an authority in the medical space, we want to be able to know that and start to push you up a little bit higher whenever a medical query comes along. Now, this is not something that's done by hand. It's not like we pick the individual topic areas. It actually applies to thousands of different topic areas. So nothing that you have to do, but if you are a topical authority, keep writing about it, keep developing, keep deepening the amount of content that you have. You really want to be a resource. You do want to be an authority. And if you turn out to be an authority, then you're more likely to be boosted by that particular change. And we've also been working on smartphone ranking. So if you have a phone that doesn't do Flash, then we're less likely to show you a page that contains Flash, for example. Over time, we might start to think about whether a site is slower on smartphones. We've also done ranking changes that say if every single page on a smartphone redirects to the root page, and there's not, you don't get the individual pages, then we might start to rank that lower as well. Okay, so now let's drill down a little bit deeper. Let's talk about web spam changes in the last few months. Penguin 2.0 and 2.1 launched. It was kind of funny because we were working on the next generation of Penguin, which we call Penguin 2.0, and we were trying to get a really soft landing. We wanted something that was, wouldn't set everybody's hair on fire, running around, screaming, and they were crazy, like, oh no, this is horrible, ah! And so Penguin 2.0 launched, and the spammers were actually like, you call that a spam change? That didn't affect me at all. And so a lot of the Black Hat spam forums were like, oh, that didn't have any impact. And so we're like, okay, well, we can turn that knob a little bit higher. And so that's what we did with Penguin 2.1. And we're going to keep iterating on those kinds of methods of detecting spam so that people don't have the incentive to just create nasty, ugly stuff that doesn't help anybody. The last, say, 4 to 5 months, we've also been working on very spammy areas. So think like payday loans in the UK, where you can actually see the fingerprints of the Russian mafia being involved, this sort of thing. So we've come up with a couple different algorithms. They don't just apply for a query like payday loans. They can apply for mesothelioma and a whole bunch of spammy areas, car insurance, stuff where there's a lot of tricks that go on, pornographic queries, those sorts of things. We're going to keep iterating on that. We're going to keep trying to improve that. We've also been taking action on advertorials or native advertising. Now, just to be clear, there's nothing wrong with advertorials or native advertising as long as you mark it clearly, as long as people know that it's an advertisement. But we've taken action on several dozen newspapers in the US and in the UK when they had paid content that wasn't labeled as paid in any way and was flowing PageRank. It's pretty common sense. We've said it since 2006, and probably before that. You shouldn't be paying for links that pass PageRank. That's a high-risk area, and that applies to advertorials and native advertising, just like it applies to everything else. And then we continue to take action on spam networks. So at one point we were like, okay, maybe we should take a poll about which spam link network should we take down next. But instead we've got a pretty good list, and we're just working our way down it. I can actually see that we're having a pretty good impact, because if you go to random Black Hat forums, you get comments like this. Who wants to punch Matt Cutts in the face? So anytime I'm being threatened with bodily violence on a Black Hat forum, I know my team is doing their job. Note that this user is Jason A. This is not Jason. If you guys want to hear about Jason, you'll have to take some time out of the Q&A and ask about it specifically. I'm not going to get into that unless people really want to hear about it. So if the spammers are unhappy on the Black Hat forums, then some, not always, but often that's a good signal. We've also been working on communication. I think a lot of people know these things, so I'll cover them relatively quickly. Miley Oye made a ton of hours of video in case you've been hacked or to help you with malware. There's a lot of sites that have problems with that, and so we're trying to figure out how we can help people preventatively not get hacked or not get malware, and then give them a warning and more heads up whenever they do get hacked. We increased the amount of examples that we included in our quality guidelines, because a lot of people were like, okay, I understand, maybe you don't want me to pay for links, but are there other examples of spammy links that you could give me? And then the team, there's a dozen people. A lot of people want to hear about, okay, what does Matt Cutts say? But there's actually a dozen people at Google who do various types of webmaster communication, right? John Mueller, Pierre Farr, Miley Oye, Zeneb, Gary, there's Wiz, there's Maria, there's a ton of people who go to all kinds of places, They go to Russian search conferences, that's Vladimir, or Maria. They go to all sorts of different places. John Mueller does webmaster office hours. A bunch of different people talk about different topics. So if you want to talk to someone at Google, we try to make that easy. And I think if you want to, dial into a webmaster office hours, that's fantastic. We also launched a website this summer or earlier this year, called How Search Works. And I want to ask, I want you to raise your hand if you've been to the How Search Works website. Okay, so that's a fair number of people, maybe 30%, maybe 25%. But most people in this room have not been to that website. If you're willing to pay hundreds of dollars to come to a search conference, I highly encourage you to come check this out, because we actually tell you the categories of spam that we take manual action on. So you can actually see these are the things, the categories that we consider spam. And then we break down what are the categories that we take action on the most. So black hat, pure spam, gibberish, auto-generated, just junk, the sort of stuff that you look at it and you immediately know it's spam, that's the #1 category. But then you can look down and you can see, oh, I see orange. That orange is the next one. What's that? Oh, that's hacked. It turns out hacked content is the next most common category. So a lot of the stuff that you're wondering, where is the web spam team spending its time, you can find those kinds of answers on this website. I highly encourage you to check it out. You can even see live screenshots of spam that we're taking out as we take it out. It's like you're watching over our shoulder as we're fighting spam. And then we'll even show data like the number of requests, reconsideration requests that we get each week. And so you can find out a lot more information about the volume of data that we process and all that sort of stuff. Okay, so all of that serves to give you an idea of where Google has gone in the last year or so. And from that, you can sort of try to extrapolate where Google's going to go, but why don't I just spell it out for you, the sort of trends that I think are really going to matter. So let's start high level again. Let's start really big. What are the mega trends, the big future trends? One of them is machine learning. Google is going to continue to try to be smarter and smarter. So our mission statement is to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. That doesn't include the word search engine in there. If we could find ways to solve equations and tell you whether it's going to rain tomorrow and extrapolate all kinds of useful information, we're going to try to do that. We're going to keep trying to figure out how to add more value for users and for searchers. Mobile is huge. What do you think these numbers represent? 6%, 25%, 40%? Anybody want to guess? In 2011, YouTube had 6% of its traffic coming from mobile phones. In 2012, YouTube had 25% of its traffic come from mobile phones. In 2013, 40% of YouTube's traffic comes from mobile phones. Mobile is coming faster than anyone expects it. There's a ton of savvy people in this room, and yet, no matter how savvy you are, I think you might be surprised at how quickly mobile is growing. In some countries, mobile traffic has already surpassed desktop traffic. In a ton of other countries, it will surpass desktop traffic in the next 1 or 2 years. So if you haven't thought about mobile, if you haven't figured out what your strategy is, if your website looks really sucky on mobile, you want to start thinking about that now. Another big trend is social identity authorship. I think Facebook did a fantastic job of recognizing the value of social and the value of knowing, who people are on the web. And if web spam knew who people were on the web, it would be much easier to keep the spammers out of search results. So things like authorship, things like knowing who you are and identity can make a big difference. Now, a lot of people are like, okay, if I go get a lot of retweets on Twitter or a lot of likes on Facebook or a lot of +1s on Google+, does that mean my ranking will go higher? Tell me now, is that the signal? Is that what I should be chasing? And my answer is not in the short term, right? It's not the case that we're able to crawl all of Facebook. They block a lot of different pages. It's not the case that we're necessarily able to access every page on Twitter. And it's not the case that +1s give you a boost in Google's ranking right now. However, in the long term, having good social signals is a reflection of being an authority. It's a reflection of being the sort of person that people listen to. And to the degree that social reflects the fact that it mirrors the fact that you are someone worth listening to, then search engines want to listen to you as well. So don't get it backwards. Don't say, I have to boost up my social so I'll rank higher. Think, I want to be an authority. I want to be someone that people listen to. I want to be an expert so that all those signals that accompany that tell the search engines that, hey, this is someone who should be ranking and ranking well. Okay, let's drill down a little bit deeper. Web spam trends. It's going to look, for the next 6 months, like web spam's not doing much. I'm just going to tell you that right now. We're going to be working on things that most people won't see. So hacking remains one of the big areas that we haven't yet tackled. We've tackled, but we're working on the next generation of hacking detection. So if you do a query like buy Viagra, it's still spammy. I'll be happy to admit that. It's still spammy because there are people willing to do illegal things and hack websites. We're working on that. We're trying to figure out the next generation so that we can catch that and make sure that those guys, the people who are willing to do those illegal things, not just black hat, but like would go to prison black hat, are not going to succeed. It will take a little bit of time, but we're going to keep working on it. We've also been working on some really hot topics internationally, things like child sexual abuse imagery. Because I started out on web spam because I was working on safe search, I still get pulled in every so often whenever there's something that we need to work on improving. And we want to make sure that if you type really nasty queries, you do not find what you're looking for on Google. So we don't want people to be able to find, you know, child porn, even if they're searching for it on Google. And then just one tidbit. A lot of people ask, when are we going to get the next PageRank update? I'll just give you the skinny right now. We have our own internal version of PageRank. It's always updating. It's continuous and continual. And every single day we have new PageRanks. Then there's also an export that says, okay, given our internal PageRanks, export that to the Google toolbar. And normally it runs once every 3 months or so, maybe every 3 or 4 months. A while ago, like earlier this year, that pipeline broke. And we were kind of like, you know, people get a little too obsessed about PageRank anyway. Maybe it's okay to just leave that for a little while. And so we don't have anybody staffed on trying to revive that pipeline. And we don't want people to get too obsessed about PageRank. And so we're probably not going to update PageRank throughout the rest of the year. And then we'll see whether anything happens in 2014. Okay, so let me give you some very concrete advice, getting down to the end of the presentation and looking forward to Q&A. So what are some things that I would look forward to in the next year and some things I would do on my website? I mentioned mobile, right? You need to get ready. If you're not thinking about whether you're going to go with whatever or responsive web design or, you know, however you're going to handle it, start thinking about it. If you're still using a site that has Flash, you are not able to be seen on a large variety of mobile phones. So you need to start thinking about how you're going to solve that sort of issue. This is tactical advice, but there's a really cool standard coming out. It's, I think, maybe already in the beta version of Chrome, called Request Autocomplete. How many people like filling out forms and typing in your credit card and all that stuff when you buy stuff online? No one? No one? Okay, I would expect at least one weird person. Okay, one like, yeah, I really like typing in forms. They're awesome. I type in forms all the day. People hate it. If you have a form on your website, people do not like that part of the experience. If you've got a funnel where you want to start with awareness and drive it down to engagement and convert that to someone who's a paying user or someone who subscribes to your newsletter or whatever your conversion goal is, having that form makes things more difficult. So Request Autocomplete is a standard whereby you can basically mark up your forms. So the easiest thing to do is just make sure you annotate your forms with some standardized markup. You can do it literally in an afternoon. I'm talking like 3 or 4 hours. It's just the HTML. You just add an extra attribute to your form that says, this is an address, or this is the city. It's not hard to do. That's the bare minimum. But Request Autocomplete will land probably in the next few months in Chrome in the main channel. And basically the sites that support that can say, you know what, do you want to one-click fill this form out? And people are like, yes, I would like to fill out this form in 1 click. So if you look at all the friction, all the people who abandon the shopping cart, all the people who leave where you don't get the traction, autocomplete is a really good way to try to reduce that and minimize that friction. Okay, we're working on a new version of things like ad-heavy pages. So we rolled out a version, I actually sort of talked about it first at PubCon a while ago, and we're turning the crank to do another version. It will actually have more of an impact in some other languages like Russian or Arabic than it will have in English. But if you look at the top part of your page and the very first thing you see front and center top above the fold is ads right there, then you might want to ask yourself, do I have the best user experience? Because we are working on an algorithm and the next iteration of that algorithm to try to take some action on that. Authorship. We want to make sure that the people who we show as authors are high quality authors. And so we're looking at the process of possibly tightening that up. It turns out if we reduce the amount of authorship that we show by just like about 10 or 15%, we're radically able to improve the quality of the authors that we show, which is another nice signal for the searchers and the users who are typing into Google to say, oh, I see this picture, I see this person is an author, this is something that I can trust, this is content that I really want to see. So it's not just going to be about markup, it's going to be about the quality of the authorship. And then in the same way, we're thinking about whether rich snippets, it might make sense to take into account the quality of the site. Rich snippets, when it started out, we actually had to have the rich snippets team say, yes, you are approved to have rich snippets. And then it moved to everybody's approved, and then we'll take out a little bit of spam piecemeal if we find it. And we're starting to find a better middle ground. And that middle ground is, if you're a reputable site, then we'll trust rich snippets on your site. If you look like you might be a spam or a low quality site, then you're less likely to have rich snippets. So that's some advice to stuff to get ready for and things to be thinking about in the next few months. One last thing is we have been working on JavaScript, not just Ajax sort of stuff, but actually the ability to fetch, execute, render, and index things created by JavaScript. So you want to be a little bit cautious about this. Don't just take a flying leap and make your entire site one big hairball of JavaScript. But Google is starting to get smarter, and if you want to use common JavaScript frameworks, very common libraries that a lot of sites use, it's more likely that you'll be able to do that and still be indexed well. So we are doing some limited testing with a small number of sites. Things look pretty good, and we're going to keep iterating on that to try to make sure that we do better JavaScript indexing. A few things worth doing now. Sign up for Webmaster Tools if you haven't. Yeah, there's a Twitter account, Google Webmaster Central. And so if you ever watch my videos on YouTube, Google WMC usually tweets it out before I do. So if you want to get in early and find out what's the newest video, what are people going to talk about today, that's a great way to do it. And then our Webmaster blog, Inside Search, Webmaster video channel. The main thing I want to say is it's been a fantastic experience coming to PubCon for the last 10 plus years. Met a lot of people that I've really enjoyed talking to, getting to be friends with some of them. I really appreciate the feedback that we get. Whenever there's bugs, whenever there's stuff that we can be doing better, that makes a huge difference because I can come back and I can say, look, the outside world is complaining about this. Here's something that we need to do better. And so I really appreciate all the people who give us that kind of feedback. And with that, I think we'll open it up. Whoever wants to ask questions.
Testing 1, 2, testing 1, 2. Mr. Engie.
Thanks, Brett. Oh, that was good and loud. I have one quick question and then one topic area. The topic area I'd like to have you address, perhaps you could do that second, which is negative SEO. But before that, whenever you talk about Google Plus signals, you always specifically say +1s. And I want to see if you can differentiate between a +1 that does not come with a sharing action, a comment, versus a share where you're actually sharing something, or even potentially sharing a link. Because I think it makes sense that those are a little bit different scenario, because when you do a share, there's a little bit more of the person doing the share invested in the event.
Yep, absolutely. So when I talk about +1s a lot, but mainly that's just because it's emblematic of the sort of signals that you get from Google+. So it's not the case that a +1 or a share or a comment or something like that makes a difference in ranking today. Now, that's in generalized ranking. I will say for personalized search, if you're friends with someone and they post something or they've claimed authorship of it, that sort of thing, then that can affect whether a picture shows up, and maybe you'll click on it more often because you know that person. But I'm talking about the generalized web ranking. So the higher bit is, I talk about +1s specifically because it's easier to just talk about +1s. But the broader picture is the same, which is it's still short-term for social. We're still investigating those signals. Long-term, I'm very bullish on the idea of social and identity. Okay, so let's talk about negative SEO. Great question. We have thought about negative SEO for years and years and years and years. We have to design our algorithms such that one person can't torpedo another person, and we think hard about that. Now, with Penguin, the sorts of things that you're doing, if there's black hat spam going on, it doesn't just remove the boost that you might get. It can actually have a slightly negative effect. And because of that, we've tried to be very, very careful, and we haven't gone as strong in some aspects of Penguin in order to try to make sure that we minimize the potential for negative SEO. I think negative SEO is something that a lot of people worry about, but is actually relatively rare. So I got a complaint from a site that sells wigs, and they said, you know what, my other wig competitor is doing negative SEO on me, and it's not fair, my rankings have dropped, and you guys should do better designing algorithms. And I sent him back a link that had been live since 2010, I think. And it was a paid link. It was abundantly clear it was a paid link. It was directly to his site, keyword-rich anchor text, and it had been there for 2 or 3 years. And I was like, you really think that your competitor started doing negative SEO in 2010 before Panda even launched, right? And so there's a lot of people who are worried about it and who are thinking, oh, I've got this competitor who's doing something to me, when we're designing the algorithms to try to make it as difficult as possible for that to happen. And a lot of people don't know what in-house or outsourced SEO might have made a lot of a mess. Now, one of the things that we did is last year we introduced the disavow tool. In fact, I think I announced it at PubCon last year. And so if you have been cleaning up the mess that your in-house or outsourced SEO did, and you've gotten as many links as you can down. And we've seen reconsideration requests that include postcards, where people have sent a stack of physical letters to people and said, please take these down. Once you have exhausted those kinds of options, that's the perfect thing for disavowing. So the disavow tool is intended for that sort of cleanup and to make cleanup easier. But if you are worried about negative SEO, if you do think that someone has really got it in for you, then you can use the disavow tool. You can go to Webmaster Tools, you can sort links by the most recent, so you can see the links that we're seeing, you can see how we're garnering them, and then you can actually go through, and if you see a new link that you really think some competitor is doing, you can disavow it. And you can disavow at the domain level. But in general, it's not as big a phenomenon as most people are actually worried about. So that's just a little bit about it. The other thing I'll mention is on Webmaster Tools, we've started to give better backlinks, more diverse backlinks. We used to give you basically sorted by the alphabet. And so if you were, say, Amazon, you get like 100,000 backlinks and it would stop at like AAAAA.com or something like that. Now we actually give a much better random sample of those backlinks. They're still sorted alphabetically, but after we've sampled from the entire set that we have in our base index. And so if you are worried about negative SEO, or if you think that you've had a SEO who did bad work for you, you can get a much better picture of what's actually been going on. So that launched just the last few months. So if you haven't gone to download your links, 100,000 links from Webmaster Tools, I would recommend that because you'll get a much better picture of what's actually going on.
Matt. Two quick announcements while you're looking for somebody to ask a question from there, Joe.
I have one.
Oh, you have one. Well, that's where I was going too. Two quick things. Number one, those going to PubCon Labs, that'll be in the middle of the exhibit hall. That was not announced earlier. It should have been in the middle of the exhibit hall. Number two, before I forget, I want to personally thank Mr. Jim Boykin and Internet Marketing Ninjas for sponsoring the conference this year. They underwrote everything this year. Thank you, Jim. Let's give him a round of applause. And last thing, for those watching at home, hi Jason, I'm sure you're watching. So did you catch yesterday's keynote by chance, Matt?
So I was flying in right while Jason's keynote was happening, and I gather it was kind of interesting. Yeah, somebody called somebody else a liar, something like that. I don't know. Evil, I don't know. Not a good partner. I actually made some slides.
Go for it.
Well, no. Let me put it to the crowd. No. Yeah. So I asked Jason on Twitter whether he wanted the polite response or the thorough response. You're not going to get the thorough response. At most, I will give you the polite response. I did make some slides, but I'm happy to do Q&A. Everybody wants the bloodthirst. Everybody wants the SEO cage match. And I'm not gonna smack down Jason. I'm just gonna give a careful view of my considered opinion of how things went down. But that's like 5, 10, 7 minutes away from regular questions.
We'll wait. We're not going anywhere.
Do you guys actually want to hear like our take? Yes! Let the record show people asked for it. Okay, so the appendix. All right.
It's all a setup.
This is not a wrestling match. You guys shouldn't want us to fight. Like, here's the thing. I have huge, I'm going to look straight into the camera in case he's watching. I have huge respect for Jason Calacanis. He's a smart guy. He's a passionate guy. He calls it the way he sees it. And he was trying to do the best he could with his business. And his business is like his baby, right? He's taken money, he's got employees, he's working as best he can to try to make sure that Mahalo succeeded, right? And I can understand why he would be frustrated. So I don't begrudge Jason anything at all, but I'll try to give a little bit of context here. So on Twitter yesterday, somebody asked him, Jason, why would Matt Cutts or Google apologize when Panda made the results significantly better? And I thought the response from Jason was pretty interesting. He said, a lot of babies got thrown out with the bathwater, which I would actually agree. The first launch of Panda was pretty substantial, right? It was a jolt. He said they could have rolled out slowly. I actually disagree with that. They could have shown changes. I think he means shown changes to partners, that sort of thing. So let me just take this idea that we could have rolled out slowly, and let me go backwards in time a little bit. I'm not sure if everybody remembers what it was like in 2011. We actually started worrying about low quality content and content farms in 2010. So we were working on this problem for 8 or 9 months before it really broke big. But then on January 1st, there was an article by Vivek Wadhwa in TechCrunch that said why we desperately need a new and better Google. Jeff Atwood from Coding Horror said Google, the once essential tool, is somehow losing its edge. The spammers, scrapers, and SEO to the hill content farms are winning. Christina Halverson said, I believe if Google does not get on top of the content farm situation, it's going to be their downfall, and I mean that sincerely. Marco Ament, a lot of people have heard of, said massive amounts of technically not spam sites are generated by penny-hungry affiliate marketers and sleazy web content startups to target long-tail Google queries en masse. So this is what it was like in 2011. We've been working on the problem for a long time, and suddenly everybody decided to be really angry at once. It got so bad, here's Read White Web. Somebody said, can quality survive? They said Google needs to wake up and smell the coffee. I have a half dozen articles like this. They're really painful to read when you already know there's a problem, when you're already working as fast as you can on that problem. As a stopgap measure, someone on my team made a Chrome extension that would let you block sites. I'm not sure if people can see the red box. 197,000 people have installed that Chrome extension. So there were a lot of people who were not happy with the quality of Google in early 2011, who did not like the content farms. It was our internal metrics, our internal feelings, our internal data was saying that, the outside world was saying that, and then 200,000 people installing this Chrome extension all shows that people were not happy about content farms. They did not want content from content farms in January, February of 2011. Now, where does Mahalo come into that picture? Well, here's an article by Business Insider back then. You know, people have made fun of Business Insider, saying, oh, sometimes they take content from other guys and they summarize it, and you know, they don't always have the deepest, most introspective reporting. And here's Business Insider calling out Mahalo, right? They called it hilariously useless. The paragraph at the bottom, the bad news for Jason Calacanis is that the Mahalo page was laughable. And then they said, seriously, like, not joking. They did not like the content, the quality of Mahalo. So it got so bad, there were actually people making jokes about content farms. There were parody sites, how to stub your toe. How to stub your toe. So there's a site called thecontentfarm.tumblr.com. By the way, the instructions on how to stub your toe: choose a place to walk, pick one of 4 cardinal directions, walk, continue in this fashion until you stub your toe. Right? No joke. There were people making fun of content farms so much, there was actually an article about how to pour milk. Okay, so let me just, you know, here we are in the time machine, remembering what was going on. Grasp the handle of the container in which the milk is with your hand. Lift it in an upwards direction towards the ceiling by moving your arm while still holding the container and the handle with your hand. Position the opening or orifice of the container over or on top of some type of receptacle, such as a glass, cup, mug, bowl, teacup, small pitcher, measuring cup, or saucer, right? People have seen that kind of keyword stuffing going on. So Google did have to move fast. As soon as we had the signals ready, we wanted to launch them. We knew that we could iterate. We knew that we could improve over time. And in fact, we launched this personal block list pretty much to just tide people over for a month or two, because we knew we had the signals coming, and this was something where we could sort of have a valve where people could get a little bit of the rage out of their system. Now, the other issue that I think Jason had is, I think, and I didn't see the keynote and I haven't watched it on the Ustream, so you know, correct me if I get it wrong, but he seemed to be implying that Google was not a good partner. That Google wasn't doing as good as it could as far as being a partner. Now, that's kind of interesting, because that's not how we think about it in search quality. Mahalo was a partner with YouTube, but if you say, look, if you're a special partner with YouTube, should you get to have a one-on-one meeting with Matt at the Googleplex, I think most people would say, no, that doesn't seem fair. It doesn't seem right if you're a partner, with YouTube or some other property that you automatically get to talk to the search quality team. So that's kind of tough. I mean, Demand Media was a partner on YouTube. Does that mean that Demand Media should get special treatment, that they should get a special meeting? I don't think that that's the case. Now, Jason can actually be pretty insistent. So he wanted to have a meeting with me and talk about things. Has anybody else had a one-on-one meeting with me at the Googleplex to talk about Panda? Don't raise your hands because I know the answer is 0 in this room, okay? But I actually agreed to meet with Jason. He can be pretty insistent. He really wanted to make his case that Mahalo was high quality. The problem is, I was the messenger. Jason wanted to convince me that there was high quality content on Mahalo. And I believe that there was some high quality content, but in aggregate, the signals that we had, the data in the algorithm said that it was not, in aggregate, a high quality site. The other issue is, it's really tough to go into a meeting because you don't want to be the guy to say, hey, I know you love your business, I know you're passionate about your business, I know you're working hard and you're trying to adjust and you're trying to improve the quality of your business, but your site is actually one of the most blocked sites in this Chrome extension. Like, that's really hard news to break to somebody. And when the other person really wants to convince you that it's high quality content, I think ultimately we came to an impasse at that meeting. And, for good reasons. He wanted to convince me it was high quality content. I was trying to break the news that even if he convinced me, it wouldn't make any difference. It's sort of like getting mad at a traffic cop whenever the government is shut down. Panda wasn't in the web spam team. It was actually in the larger quality team. The initial launch didn't come from web spam at all. So I was happy to try to explain all of this to Jason, but ultimately he was not happy with the outcome, and I can understand why he's frustrated. So content farms were a serious issue. We couldn't roll out changes slowly, and we really do not want to give partners special treatment. In fact, after that meeting with Jason, I pretty much decided I don't ever want to meet. And I didn't talk to Jason because he was a partner. I talked to him because he had a high-impact site. In some ways he'd said he was a search engine, and so I wanted to bend over backwards to try to give him information and give him context. But we've actually got a pretty good policy now. I have an internal website. Has anybody watched a YouTube video that I made? A few people. And everybody's like, I don't want to raise my hand. We've also made a couple internal videos. So I've made a 5-minute internal video when basically a salesperson comes to me and they say, hey, this person spends X million dollars a year, will you talk to them? Or, hey, this is a really valued partner. Or, this is a great client. I send them to this little mini website that we have inside Google that basically explains why we won't talk to them. Because we don't want to give special treatment to partners, advertisers, or clients. And that's basically just the way it works. So 6 months after Panda launched, in roughly 6 months, in June, there was a quote in the New York Times, "You can't mess with Google forever. Just a short time ago, the web seemed ungovernable. Bad content was driving out good. But Google asserted itself, and credit is due. Panda represents good cyber governance. It has allowed Google to send untrustworthy, repetitive, and unsatisfying content to the back of the class." So that's the kind of verdict that we have on Panda. We did have to launch it quickly. There was some collateral damage. We had to figure out how to iterate and improve. But ultimately, there was a fundamental disagreement between Jason and I about the quality of a particular site. And more importantly, there was a disagreement between Jason and the algorithm. And we have no exceptions to Panda. We have no exceptions whatsoever. So even if he had convinced me that Mahalo was the best site in the world, at best I could have gone to the engineers and said, can you try to find some signals that show that this is a good site? We did that analysis. We didn't find the data to support that. So I understand if Jason's angry. I understand if he's frustrated. He had a lot of people depending on him. He was under a lot of pressure. I get a lot of complaints. I get a lot of anger. I get a lot of frustration. And that's okay, right? It's all right if a black hat spammer wants to say, I want to punch Matt Cutts in the face. That's all right. What I have to do is look at what the other person's saying and look and see, is there a kernel of truth in there? Is there something that we need to do better? And I think there were things that we needed to do better. We've tried to improve our communication. We've tried to make things more scalable. We're sending out example URLs and messages so that people know what's exactly wrong if we've taken manual action. We've launched the manual action viewer so you can actually see whether Google has put a manual web spam action on your site or if it's only algorithmic ranking. So there were a lot of things that we needed to improve, and I appreciated Jason's feedback. If he's still angry at me, then that's his call. But I think in every one of these encounters, whether it's Michael Gray calling us out, Aaron Wall calling us out, Jason Kalakanas calling us out, in every one of those instances, that's an opportunity for us to say, what's the kernel of truth behind what they're saying and what can we do better? And I think that we're doing better now than we did in 2011, and we'll do better in the future, but we have to keep working on that. So if you guys wanted a cage match, I'm sorry, but there's a couple well-meaning people who both are trying to do what they think is right. And that's it. Okay.
All right, so back to the PubCon type questions. I spoke to a bunch of speakers. They kind of gave me a few questions they wanted to run by. We'll start with the first one. We'll move to the audience. In July, Google updated the link schemes, and there was a lot of changes, a lot of tactics that were used by many people in this room are no longer valid. Do we have to worry about old content that may violate some of that?
Yeah, so I think this question especially seems to apply to press releases. I was getting a lot of links from press releases, and then Google specifically called out press releases. So do I need to worry about that? Do I need to go back in time? It's kind of weird because people act like our guidelines change a lot, but the fundamental ideas behind our guidelines haven't changed that much. So people, for the most part, should know if you're paying for something, then you shouldn't get PageRank out of it. That's basically, money under the table, it's payola. We don't want that sort of stuff to count. So if you were doing a press release and there's no keyword text, hey, great, you're just trying to convince a bunch of editors to write those articles. If you're doing a press release and you're like embedding, and you've certainly seen plenty of those kinds of press releases where they're throwing 3 or 4 keyword-rich articles or anchor text in there, then that is something to pay attention to. It's not that it's new. We've always had the principle if you're paying $100 or whatever for a press release, then that shouldn't count, that shouldn't flow PageRank, that shouldn't flow anchor text. We're just clarifying our existing principles in that regard. Now, especially with regard to press releases, what we've done is we've identified a lot of the top press release sites. And all we have to do is we say, okay, you know what? Maybe we don't trust links or anchors coming out of those sites. We don't count them as spam. We just say, just ignore those links. And that's okay, because the idea behind a press release is to convince someone to write about it. If you can get an editor or a reporter to take that seriously, that's fantastic. That's great. That newspaper article, hopefully it'll include a link, but at the least it increases awareness. But if you're worrying about press releases, for the most part, we've already taken care of those. If you thought you were paying $100 and you were getting keyword-rich anchor text, what you were really getting is an article, a press release, and then you probably weren't getting that PageRank, you weren't getting that anchor text. So it's not that it would necessarily cause you a penalty. I wouldn't panic. But going forward, I would say if someone approaches you and they're like, hey, do you want to be in my directory? Well, it's $100, but I'll guarantee you whatever listing you want. Yes, you should be cautious about that. You should not do that. Hopefully that's relatively baked in as far as common sense by now. But
hi, a lot of, yeah.
Hi.
More and more sites are using infinite scrolling. Can you address that?
Absolutely. So infinite scrolling is getting more common, and that's the sort of thing like JavaScript. It is tricky because it's almost like a calendar where you can say, okay, give me all the dates in 2012, and then 2013, and then 2014, and in theory, Googlebot could keep crawling all the way up to the year 10,000, and we'd never know when to stop. So you might want to think about building in some stuff. You might not want to have infinite scroll. You might want to have the scroll finish at some point. But Google is getting better at being able to access those links and say, okay, do those scroll events, that sort of thing. I wouldn't necessarily count on Google being able to, like if you're going to move the mouse or something like that, and you have to wait until the scroll bar gets to the bottom of the page, that's the sort of thing where Googlebot might not be literally physically scrolling. So you probably do want to think about having some paginated kind of interface where people can still scroll through, if you can. We'll keep working on that because we want the web to be beautiful and modern and a seamless experience. But you still probably want to build in those safety guards because even if Googlebot does well, smaller search engines, DuckDuckGo, Blecko, whatever, they might not spend quite as much time on the page processing. So it's still probably a good idea to have the fallback and have those as static links somewhere on your site, at least for the sort of foreseeable future.
Matt.
Hey there.
I have two questions. The first one is for people who are trying to establish authority, how do they compete with people who have been around for a long time? And I'm looking for some new ideas. For example, with like usability, could they improve their product descriptions to help improve the, establish themselves? I'm thinking of local businesses and how they can compete with the larger ones, and perhaps they know their products a little bit better. Can they, enhance their product descriptions or captions naturally, and will Google notice that? Also, are ebooks like PDFs, do they contribute to authority? Okay.
Cool. Okay, so good questions. How can a small site build authority? And it is possible, but it's definitely a lot of elbow work, right? There's not a lot of shortcuts, but there are some really good best practices. It never hurts to go back to basics. Like some of the things that work really well are having a blog or having a forum, having that unique content, having something that's, if your business model is, I'm going to grab an affiliate feed, I'm going to just slap that affiliate feed up on the web, or I'm going to spin it with a thesaurus, and I'm just going to slap that up on the web. That is not the sort of thing that stands the test of time. But if you're writing unique descriptions, if you make them a little bit more catchy, a little bit more compelling, something like that, that can be a great way to work. Anything that's creative, right? If you think about what were the last 5 things you shared on Facebook or Twitter, they're probably something creative. If it's a video, it's fun, it's coming at it from a different angle. So I'd say a combination of back to the basics, things like a blog, things like a forum, reaching out to the local newspaper, all that sort of, just straight, normal, vanilla, gotta put in the time kind of stuff. And then at the same time, think about what is the creative thing. Somebody was like, plumbing, how are you gonna make plumbing interesting? You know what? There are probably a ton of plumbing stories, right? I had to get my, the pipes in our house snaked out recently, and I spent the whole afternoon with the plumber, and he kept me laughing the whole time, right? He was like, oh, you wouldn't believe this one guy. Oh man, it was like, the whole afternoon passed in like the blink of an eye. And if that was on a blog, I would like totally read that. It's no longer on the web that I can find, but there was an adult video store clerk who would write about her experience of being in an adult video store. And like, I spent an entire, night just reading, like, I'm not especially interested in adult video stores, but I was interested in her stories. So those kinds of things, developing a personality, developing a voice, all that stuff works really, really well. The other question is about citations or mentions in PDFs or text. We tend to be a little bit more skeptical of that. And the reason is, I don't know if you guys know this, but there are some spammers in the world. And the spammers, they'll use these automated packages, Xrumor, Scrapebox, whatever, and they just say, I am going to make thousands and thousands of blog comments. And if you'll notice, they do it very opportunistically. They're going to sign it with HTML, they're going to sign it with BB code, they're going to sign these links in all these different formats, and then they'll also just throw in like a plain text, hyperlink. So that's why I worry about things like citations, because you would see a lot of spammers who are like, I'm just going to leave a PDF lying around all over the place with all my URLs. And we've seen that. We've seen spam ebooks on Amazon where they're just like automatically generated and they actually have spam links in them. So I'm not going to take that off the table as a signal. Other than you can't buy ads and it won't help your ranking, we pretty much try to leave ourselves an open area as far as potential ranking signals. But I would be a little skeptical about that because I'd worry about the spam implications.
And the second one was related to the blog things. I heard some sort of rumor that there's a limit to how often you can blog. Is there any truth to that?
I would blog as often as you want to and you reasonably can. There are some sites that have very high volumes. The Verge, Engadget, some sites that basically like you come back and there's a whole new set of, Huffington Post, this sort of stuff. But that's usually because they have a lot of writers, they have a lot of contributors, stuff like that. I wouldn't overdo it. I actually have less than 1,000 blogs on my website, right? So in, 8 years of blogging, I've written less than 1,000 articles, right? So it's really more about what are the right articles. I have one article that's like, why Google won't remove that page you don't like. And whoever writes in and says, oh, I don't like this algorithm, or I want this page to go away, I can send them to that one article. So oftentimes, quality over quantity actually will prevail there.
Time for one more question right over here. Paul?
Hey Matt, my name is Paul from Promoda. A nice talk. I would like to ask one specific question. You guys did a great job with the Google algorithms And that basically helps a lot of our clients to educate, and they basically respect a lot more what we do. And for one client that's thrown into the problem, for another one that's thrown into the new opportunities. My question is, I came in from the Ukraine, which is Russian-speaking country. Would you guys mind to do some changes over there? Because the results in the Google on those kind of markets is still spammy. What is your approach on that?
I agree we need to do more in other countries. You know, the engineers in the web spam team are primarily based in Mountain View, and so we speak English. We have some people that speak Romanian, we have some people that speak Chinese, but I totally agree that in a lot of other languages things are worse. Sometimes that's because there isn't as much content, like in Arabic, for example, that sort of thing. But sometimes it's because we need to do better. We need to make sure that our internationalized algorithms work, more effectively. Especially, for example, Russia has been a big focus in the last few months. So the team that's been working on reducing the amount of top above the fold ad heavy pages, that's actually a team in Russia, and they were driven because they were like, this is a problem here. We've got people who give us complaints in Turkey, who give us complaints in Polish. So I know we have a long way to go. We'll continue to work on it, and hopefully as people make great content and we keep continuing to focus in other countries, we'll drive that spam level down around the world.
One other question that came up in several of the sessions and in yesterday's illustrious keynote, this concept that we allow you guys to use our content. It's kind of this unwritten partnership there, implicit partnership that you give us a great service and you can use all our content. And now over the years with the knowledge graph and other things you guys have done, that bar on the line has continued to move down. The number of pixels you guys take. On my netbook, I popped open last night, one search, there literally wasn't anything but Google on the top of the page. You had to scroll to find results. I've never heard anybody talk about that from Google. You got any comment on that? Or?
Yeah, it's interesting. I grill my office mate, Amit Singhal, and he then goes and talks to the head of the ads, or the engineer lead on the ads product area. And we do keep an eye on that, and we don't want to let that get out of control. So one thing that we've actually worked on, if you look at the newer versions of Chrome, we've done a lot of experiments with, if you've got an address bar and you've got a Google search bar, you've actually got a lot of screen real estate that's kind of redundant. And we've played around with taking that real estate back and sort of unifying the address, the omnibar and the Google search box a little bit. And that might actually give you quite a bit of extra pixels. And then those extra pixels can be dedicated to organic rather than to ads. But I certainly hear people who, a lot of the times when people are complaining, they'll pick one search that's like credit cards, or they'll pick something that's kind of like, okay, it's got a lot of ads, when the vast majority of searches are more like ancient Mayan art, or why did the Civil War start, or something like that. But at the same time, we are aware of that, we are keeping an eye on that, and if people keep really don't feel shy about poking us on that, because that gives me more material whenever I can walk around within the company and say, look, people are saying that this becomes a problem. I think in general, our mission statement is to provide the world with information, and if we can give answers to people, they do want to give answers. They don't want to only point to web pages if you know how old the Prime Minister of Turkey is. So the way I've heard it expressed is you want to add enough value that it's not just one little 3-word factoid that's on your website. You really want people to be landing there to get high-quality reviews or high-quality content or discussion, to really read about why should I like the iPad Air or something like that. Or if it's like, what date was the iPad Air released? That's a little factoid, and that's a little harder to peg the amount of value for users. So look for in general, the more value you're adding for users, the more we want to return you in the search results.
All right, thank you very much. I appreciate it, Matt. The exhibit hall is...
OMReport and Andre Alpa would like to thank you for your attention. You can get more episodes on www.OMReport.com.